money roll, yeah, I'm looking at the bank statements, I do not want to jail, yeah, nuts with my gang, you be just a stain, cover on my chain.
What's going on, guys? Hope you guys are having a great day as usual. So for this video, I'm going to be doing a reaction to World War II Oversimplified. And guys, I'm just going to break down World War II, or what I know of World War II before we jump into the video. So I'm just going to give you a little summary of what happened, what were the causes of World War II, what happened during World War II, and what led up to the demise of Hitler losing World War II. So let's jump into that right away. Pretty much after World War I, and World War I pretty much started because of imperialism, nationalism, the assassination of Franz Ferdinand by the Black Hand. If you guys do a little digging, you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. And after World War II, pretty much the League of Nations, which is pretty much the United Nations before the United Nations started, they pretty much put a crazy amount of sanctions on Germany because they blamed Germany for pretty much starting World War I. And Germany would have to repay every country that they destroyed in World War I, including themselves. So it was pretty much called the Treaty of Versailles because it was signed in Versailles, France. And pretty much that is, I think, the determining factor of what made Germany want to start World War II, you know? That treaty pretty much put Germany in a crazy depression for the next 20 years. And during that depression, there was this guy called Hitler. We all know who Hitler is now. I think he was in jail at this time. Early 1930s, you know, he was in jail. He wrote a book called Mein Kampf, and pretty much that translates to My Struggle, right? And he was, in that book, he was pretty much telling or writing about his struggles during World War I because he fought in World War I. Also, his struggles living through the Depression in Germany. After he got out of jail, his book was selling great, and he started looking around Germany pretty much to see what was going on, who was prospering, and everybody was doing bad. Everybody was having a struggle. Everybody was having hardships. The only people that were doing good were the Jewish people because they owned small businesses, they owned the banks, and they were able to prosper when everybody else was struggling. So Hitler, being the smart person that he is, he was able to convince the German people that all of their problems were because of the Jewish population. Like, he was just saying, how could everybody in our country be struggling, and look at these guys. These guys are winning. These guys are profiting right now. They're advancing while we're all struggling. You know, you could go back to the time and even look at pictures of people buying loaves of bread for hundreds and hundreds of dollars, which is pretty much inflation, right? Like, we deal with inflation even to this day, right? Like 10 years ago, I could buy a Big Mac meal for $5. Now it's like 12 bucks, you know? That's just in the span of 10 years. So we're dealing with inflation at this point today in history. So it's always important to know history so you're able to see things like that happen and keep an eye on things like that as well, right? Because if you don't keep an eye on things like that, they can spiral out of control, and that just leads to more conflict and problems throughout society. So let's get back to World War II. At this point in time, I think late 1930s, Germany stopped paying the Treaty of Versailles. They were building up their own army secretly. No other nation knew that they were building up an army. Because at this point in time, too, in history, there was no cameras, there was no surveillance. Other countries didn't know what other countries were doing. You know, you only knew what you were doing. And most countries at this point in time were isolationist countries. They were just doing what they needed to do by themselves, kind of prospering. Other countries weren't so focused on what everybody else was doing. The world was kind of more by itself. Today, in today's day and age, the world is connected. If something happens in one country, everybody's going to know about it within like 5 to 10 hours, right? And back in those days, no one knew anything was going on in any other country. So Hitler was very smart. He said, we're not paying the Treaty of Versailles anymore, right? Very, very ballsy, very bold of Germans to do that. He also was building up, like I said, an army in secret, building up hundreds of tanks, airplanes, you name it, they were building it up. So let's skip ahead. The late 1930s, Hitler becomes higher ranked, he becomes chancellor. He starts with his final solution. That's the execution of the Jews. That's where he was rounding up Jews and putting them into camps and exterminating them, killing them. Very, very bad behavior, you know? And I think that's why people like have PTSD and stuff like that, is because being humans, we're not supposed to kill other humans, you know? That will definitely scar our souls, and that will definitely, it will definitely shift our mentality. We're all humans, we're all beings on this earth, we're all sentient. We're not supposed to kill each other. That's why when people kill each other, they go crazy, they have PTSD, all these quote-unquote illnesses. They're not illnesses, you're just not supposed to harm someone to that degree. That's what that means, you know? So Hitler, at this point in time, he starts taking over other countries, like Austria. I mean, Austria was with them, but he just kind of took them over. Belgium, Poland, and the world pretty much didn't do anything. Another fatal flaw is the world didn't do anything. The world didn't step in and say, hey, you're not allowed to do that. You know what I mean? You can't just take over any country you want. Because again, at that point in time, imperialism was a big thing. Imperialism, if you guys don't know, that just means countries were taking over other countries. England, France, Italy, Portugal, Spain, all the European countries were just imposing their will on the rest of the world. They were just taking over countries in Africa, taking over countries in Asia and India, around those areas. So everybody just saw what Hitler was doing. They're just like, oh, they're just pretty much expanding their territory. You know what I mean? They're just pretty much doing what they need to do in order to prosper. So everybody turned a blind eye while Hitler was slowly taking over these small countries. And that pretty much, the fact that no one did anything gave Hitler more confidence in what he was doing. So the next country that he chose to invade, pretty much the biggest country that he chose to invade, which pretty much kicked off World War II. I mean, Poland was pretty much one of them, but France. And the way he attacked was brilliant as well. It's called Blitzkrieg. It's pretty much an all-out assault on your country within a span of a few hours. I mean, sending all the planes, all the tanks, all the military right to your doorstep. And like I said, at this point in time, there was no phones to get on and you could just call another country for backup. You know, at this point in time, you're on your own. So people in France, they just woke up one day and there was a military right at their doorstep. They couldn't really do anything. They were just baffled. They were shocked. They didn't even know what to do. And France actually gave up in 2 days. They gave up in 2 days. That's why people always make fun of the French, you know, because how could you give up in 2 days? And the whole thing is, France and Germany are right beside each other. And at that point in time in history, they always had beef. They never liked each other. You know what I mean? So it was inevitable that one of them they were going to fight, you know? It was inevitable. They were eventually going to fight at some point because they hated each other. But the fact that France just gave up in 2 days is almost laughable. That's why, like I just said, everybody always kind of clowns on French people or France, because it's just like, man, at least have a little fight. At least have a little backbone. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to go into other countries like England and Russia that actually are the reasons why World War II was won by the West, you know? Because those countries actually put up a great fight. Even though they were losing, they put up a fight. Doesn't matter. Like France, they just said, hey, we surrender. Everything you want, here, take it. So let's get back to World War II. At that point, Hitler had pretty much taken over all of Western Europe. There was no country that even put up a fight at that point. Like I said, France was pretty much, they didn't even put up a fight. I would say Poland put up more of a fight than France. And if you want to go check that out too, go check out the Warsaw ghettos and what the Germans did to the Polish people. And they still kept fighting. The Polish people, hey, respect. These guys fought no matter what, man. They were outnumbered, outgunned. They fought to the bloody end, bro. That's why I give them a lot of respect. So, at this point, this is mid, like, 1942s. We're in the war. We're in it, right? So, at this point, Hitler decides to attack England, right? And this is going to be a harder attack because England is an island. So, you're not going to be able to attack them by land, right? You're only going to be able to bombard them in the air, right? So, Hitler does that. He chooses to attack them, which is very smart, because if he would have taken over England, I think he would have won the war, you know, because he would have had all of Europe, he would have had the coastline, so no ships could come in even without his permission. So he decided to do that. Very smart. He pretty much destroyed all of London, bombed the hell out of it, bombed the hell out of their air force, their bases, everything. He was winning that war. England was almost on the brink of giving up. It's crazy. It's crazy to think about. But Winston Churchill, being a G that he is, that's Winston Churchill. If you guys don't know, he was the president of England at the time. He said, we're never going to surrender. He gave one of those crazy, heartwarming speeches that rallied all the English people together, and kind of, just like I said, they weren't going down without a fight. They were just going to, either they were all going to get wiped out, or they were not going to surrender like France, pretty much is what I'm saying. They were all or nothing. Either we all get killed or we win this war, you know? So I give a lot of respect to Winston Churchill and the Englishmen and women that fought during that time, because they were getting killed, they were getting smoked. London was a disaster, their military was a disaster, but they still continued to fight. At this point in time, Hitler is beating these guys, and the one stupid, fatal flaw that Hitler chooses to do is attack Russia, guys. And if you want to dig deeper into this operation was called Operation Barbarossa. Pretty much Hitler, before the war, or kind of during the war, I guess he made an agreement with Stalin that he wasn't going to attack. So Russia was kind of just doing their own thing. Like I said, a lot of countries were isolationist countries. They were just like, whatever, we're not going to get involved, don't touch us, we won't touch you, right? So Hitler decides to sneak attack Russia. Russia, we all know Russia is a big place. Russia to this day has never fully been conquered. You cannot conquer Russia. Don't even try, because it's just too big of a landmass. It's too big of an area. And those guys are fighters. Like I said, like the English, they're fighters. They're not going down without a fight. And they'll fight to the bloody end. They're not going to give up like France. You know, I keep making fun of France, but it's like, man, to just give up in 2 days is just almost like laughable, you know? Like, this is World War, bro. This is a war that will decide the fate of all humans on this earth. And you're just going to call it quits? Like, that's embarrassing to me. So, Russia does 2 or 3 very smart things here, right? They pretty much, Stalin being the Russian president at the time, he moves back all the major cities in Russia. He moves them way inland in Russia. So in order to get to them, the Germans have to go through a lot of crazy terrains, a lot of unpredictability. And the thing about Russians too is every time the Germans went into a new Russian town, everybody in the city would be against them. You know what I mean? It was kind of like guerrilla warfare. You would have old people shooting from windows, kids, women, men. Like I said, the Russians were down. They were just down to fight, man. They weren't going to give up. Everybody was against the Germans. So it was guerrilla warfare. Every city you go into, everybody was fighting you constantly. Not only that, but Hitler decided to invade Russia during the winter. I mean, I live in Canada, so we have similar winters to Russia. And man, if you're not ready for it, you're gonna suffer badly. If you gotta walk day in and day out through a winter in Russia, and you don't have the right equipment, you don't have the right food, it's hard to get equipment and food to you because of the snow and the conditions. So a lot of German people actually died, or German soldiers actually died before even fighting, before even getting to a lot of these prominent Russian cities, because like I said, Stalin moved all those cities back. He was very smart, you know what I mean? And that's just Russia. You'll never conquer Russia because they're just too big of a nation, right? They can move their major cities way back, and just to get to their major cities, it would be it's brutal, you know what I mean? Brutal, brutal, brutal. So very smart tactical planning by Russia and Stalin and the higher-ups in Russia, and that pretty much allowed Russia to fight Germany while England was fighting Germany at the same time. So Hitler, he got himself into a little bit of a trouble because he had a war going on 2 fronts. On the east front against Russia, on the west front against England. And it's hard to kind of split up resources on two ends, especially, like I said, in winter in Russia. You would have to get a lot more resources to your people in Russia at this point in time, which they were struggling to even get through Russia because they didn't know the terrain, they didn't know where they were going necessarily. It was cold, people were dying, people were malnourished, they didn't get enough food. So there's a lot of problems going on in terms of just supplying your military with what they need to do, or what they need to have in order to do what they need to do, right? Crazy stuff, guys. And pretty much the nail in the coffin of World War II is pretty much one of Germany's allies. Germany at this point in time had, like I said, all of Western Europe under their control. They also had Japan, who was their ally, the Ottoman Empire, that's modern day Turkey, right? And Italy, right? So one of Japan's allies did an unthinkable thing at that point in time in the Pacific, and that is the Japanese. They attacked Pearl Harbor, right? They attacked America. America, like I said, they were an isolationist state. They weren't gonna do anything. They were just like, hey, we're not doing anything. Don't mess with us. We won't mess with you. Japan, I don't know what happened, but Japan just decided to attack Pearl Harbor. Big mistake. Even for Japan, bigger mistake, because Japan would end up getting nuked twice. Like, big mistake, Japan. You effed up, you know? You effed up, Japan. So Japan attacks Pearl Harbor. America comes back. They send people to go fight Japan. Boom, boom, boom. They're fighting. And America realizes, like, these Japanese people are crazy. Like, Japan, they're loyal. They're just killing themselves. They're kamikazing. They're destroying. They're actually beating America because they're more ruthless. They don't care if they die. They're willing to do whatever it takes. Literally whatever it takes. Even give up their life in order to get an advantage. So America realizes this, and they're like, okay, listen. We need a weapon that's going to just destroy these guys and pretty much just make these guys realize that they don't have a chance. And at this point, all countries are working on getting a super weapon. Russia, Germany, every country's working on it. But America has the best scientists. Albert Einstein, being a Jew, he actually escaped Germany and went to America and helped them build the atom bomb. You know what I mean? So that's cool. I always wear an Einstein shirt because I think Einstein's incredible. But Einstein helping build the atom bomb is one of his I think regrets in life, because the atom bomb killed millions and millions of innocent people, and he actually got really depressed after they dropped both Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But let's get back to World War II. So Hitler has armies on both sides. I mean, has wars on both fronts at this point in time. He's slowly starting to lose. He's slowly starting to lose. The Russians are starting to gain advantage. And it seems like both fronts are shrinking, you know? Shrinking. And then we have the invasion of Normandy. I mean, Americans come to France. They start liberating France. Like I said, Germany's stranglehold of Europe continuously, slowly starts to get smaller. At this point in time, the Axis, that's what they were called, the people fighting against Germany, the countries fighting against Germany, they were called the Axis. They signed this crazy treaty. And this, guys, is probably one of the craziest treaties ever to be signed, because it involved three of the major powers of that time. And even probably to this day, America, England, and Russia. I think Roosevelt was the president of America, Winston Churchill, and Stalin. They all signed an agreement that no matter what happens, they will forever fight Germany. That's crazy. They were never, those three countries were never going to stop going to fighting until Germany was defeated. That, like I said, to this day is probably the craziest treaty ever signed by humans. Incredible stuff, guys. This is like altering, like, history that altered the world, and the reason why we live in the world we do is because of things that happened in that war. So crazy stuff. We're getting to the end of the war. Hitler's going crazy. His whole army is being demoralized. They don't have what it takes anymore. People are starting to understand what Hitler has been doing to the German Jewish people. I mean, how he's been exterminating them. Everything is just starting to come out. like they say, the truth is always revealed, right? And good always triumphs over evil. You know what I mean? Like, that's why Hitler ended up losing, I think, in general. There can't be that much suffering, that much pain in the world, and it can't last forever. You know, there's always light in the darkness, no matter how dark things get. You know, there's always a little glimmer of light. You know, so things were looking good. At this point, we're late 1944, 1945. America drops Nagasaki and Hiroshima. After that, I think pretty much Germany kind of got the gist. They didn't want any bombs being dropped on them. At that point, Hitler kind of went into hiding. He quote-unquote committed suicide. No one really knows. I don't know. I think he committed suicide. Either way, World War II was like 70, 80 years ago. So even if he didn't, he's like an old-ass grandpa right now or something like that, you know? Like, because there's a lot of conspiracies that he's still alive and whatnot. But after World War II, France was liberated by America, and for a gift, France gave America the Statue of Liberty. Like, the Statue of Liberty. There are 3 statues of liberty in the world, I believe. I believe one of them's in Las Vegas, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section. One of them's in France, and the other one's in New York. The League of Nations was disbanded after that, and then they created the United Nations, which we still have today. And I believe in 1958 they were able to give the people of the Jewish people Israel, the land, right? Which is kind of weird. Again, it's kind of like imperialistic type of behavior. It's just saying like, hey, you guys could have this land. Even though there are people living there right now, we'll just kick all those people out. And here you go. Which is, like I said, that kind of behavior is the reason why these wars start, right? And that's why there is still a war in Israel and Palestine to this day. You cannot, that's the type of behavior that pretty much starts wars, right? It's like they didn't even learn from what they just went through, right? Imperialism and nationalism does not work. It only causes more pain, more suffering for other people, right? So that's pretty much the gist of what I know about World War II, just off my head, because I love history. When I was in high school, I used to just read the textbooks over and over and over again just to get as much information as possible. I must have read that textbook about like 50, 60 times. And that was in grade 11. I mean, I'm 28 right now. That was probably like 12 years ago. So that's just the stuff I remember off the top of my head. And that's just a little quick summary of what I believe happened in World War II, the leading causes up to it, what happened during the war, and kind of what ended the war. So let's jump into the clip. Let's see if I'm right. Let's see if I'm wrong. And we'll have a little discussion after, guys. But this is very informative because I feel like being a citizen of the world, it's always important to be aware of what's going on around you. Like I said, we are going through inflation. It's happening right now. It's just not happening too badly. It's not happening, like, it's not crazy, you know what I mean? But it's always important to understand what's going on, because Germany at that point in time was a democracy, and they changed into a fascist dictatorship overnight, you know? So things like that could still happen in today's day and age, especially with the craziness and the money and the corruption that we see going on around the world. Things could really change. So it's always important to be an aware citizen of the world, because when things do change, you want to have the knowledge to be able to help your friends and family out. If you need to get out of a situation, you need to get out ahead of time. Sometimes it's too late. When everybody else knows, it's way too late. You waited too late. And hey, it's you that's going to suffer, not other people. So it's important to take care of yourself, your family, and your friends, and be aware of these things, especially as grown adults and men in this world, you know? Like, we have to take care of our families. We being men, like, I have to take care of my mom. I have to take care of my sisters. I have to take care of my friends as well. So it's just what life's about, right? So I always feel like it's very important to be informed, and I'm very happy that someone suggested this video. But let's jump into the clip and have a little discussion after. Let's go!
This video was made possible by Skillshare. Churchill was a man with many talents. He was an artist, a butterfly enthusiast, and he had an unpublished manuscript about aliens. Clearly, he was a man with an insatiable thirst for knowledge. Maybe he could have loaded up his computer and logged onto Skillshare, an online learning community with more than 19,000 classes in design, business, technology, and more. Perhaps he was considering a side career in fashion, but didn't know where to start. On Skillshare, he would find courses in fashion design and garment construction. Or if he wanted to learn app design, improve his photography, or just how to make a really good quesadilla, he would have found courses for all of these and more on Skillshare. Skillshare gives you access to high-quality classes taught by genuine experts working in their field. I work heavily with animation, and I was genuinely blown away by the number of really useful courses available to me. Like this class full of tips and tricks for creating vector art, or this one for creating character walk cycles. For an annual subscription, Skillshare is under $10 a month. And if you'd like to try it out first, then I've got a deal just for Oversimplified viewers. The first 1,000 people to use this link, which can be found in the description, will get their first 2 months of Skillshare for just 99 cents. Be sure to try it out using the link in the description and learn something new today. Now, without further ado,
let's jump into the real shit. Let's go!
It's 1902. A young man by the name of Benito Mussolini moves from Italy to Switzerland to avoid military service. He gets big into socialism, working for trade unions, writing for socialist newspapers, advocating a violent overthrow of European monarchies, the whole shebang. This gets him in a bit of trouble with the Swiss police, so he gets arrested, sent back to Italy, set free, returns to Switzerland, is arrested again, goes back to Italy again, completes his military service after previously avoiding it, and then after a brief stint as an elementary school teacher, he finally returns to work as an avid socialist. His speeches and journalistic abilities made him famous among Italian socialists. He was anti-war, so when Italy colonized Libya in 1910, he rioted and got arrested. Then World War I came along, and once again he protested Italy's involvement. But then he thought, wait a minute, this war could bring about the social climate needed to overthrow European monarchies and bring about the socialist revolution everywhere. And suddenly he was pro-war. But his fellow socialists didn't like his new pro-war stance, so they kicked him out of the party. So then he said, you know what? I'm done with socialism. We need something new, not based on class divisions tearing us apart, but based on unity through nationality. We'll conquer the Mediterranean and reunite all Italian people just like the days of the Roman Empire.
Guys.
I'll call it fascismo, and it will guide the Italian nation to greatness. That's all well and good, Mr. Mussolini, but what kind of haircut am I giving you? Let's go with bold.
Pretty good content, pretty good video, very entertaining.
Italy had been on the winner's side in World War I, and they hoped they were going to get a lot out of it, but in the end, they only got a little, and they felt cheated. On top of that, a bad economy and weak governments meant that the Italian people were a little unhappy. So when Mussolini came along and said that he could fix everything, his fascist movement gained a lot of support. In 1922, he went to the king and said, make me prime minister, or I'll make me prime minister. And the king said, you and what army? This army. Fair enough. Then he went about establishing a dictatorship with himself at its center. Europe had its first fascist dictator. Next up, Germany. Germany had been on the loser's side, and they got absolutely wrecked by the Treaty of Versailles. They lost territory, had to demilitarize the Rhineland, had to reduce their army to just 100,000 men, couldn't have an air force, had to pay the Allies a huge amount of money that it didn't have, and a new rule was established that every Englishman withheld the right to walk into the center of Berlin, pick out any German they wanted, and spank the hell out of them. I made that last one up, but it helps you understand how all of this felt to Germans. On top of that, a bad economy and weak governments meant that when a small angry man with a silly mustache came along and said that he could fix everything, the German people loved it. Hitler had been a soldier during World War I, and he was crazy patriotic, and nobody was madder than him about Germany's humiliation. He helped start a new political party, and in 1923 attempted a march on Munich with his boys. And then he got arrested. But his popularity grew and grew, and in 1933, the president made him chancellor. He believed he was Germany's great destined savior, and he went full megalomaniac, establishing a dictatorship with himself at its center. Europe had fascist dictator number 2. Hitler and Mussolini had a lot of the same ideas, but more importantly, they had the same enemies, and they started to get along. Anyone else want to be friends? Franco? No? You good? I do. Who's that? It's Japan, and they've taken over northern China. Let's rewind a bit. Japan had isolated itself from the rest of the world for over 200 years until the Americans showed up and said, you're going to trade with us and you're going to like it. Then the Western powers imposed a bunch of unequal treaties, meaning Japan's economy was bust. They also had no natural resources, so they decided to go get some. They went to war with China to gain a sphere of influence over Korea, and they took a bunch of China's stuff. But then the West said, hey, cut that out. And since Japan couldn't take on the West, they said, okay, I guess we'll just go home. Wait a minute, what are you doing? Taking advantage of a weakened China and setting up spheres of influence. But I was the one who weakened them. We know. And you guys didn't let me have anything. We know. That seems unfair. We don't think so. Okay, see ya. So Japan thought, screw this, and went to war with Russia, and stunned everyone by actually winning. Then they fully annexed Korea, but they didn't stop there. In World War I, they took Germany's colonies and islands in Asia, and then in an incident that was maybe staged by the Japanese army, a bomb blew up a Japanese train in Manchuria, giving them an excuse to launch an invasion and take over. So here's the situation. Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, and Japan all believe they're racially superior, all feel hostility towards the Allies, and all want to militarize and take over more stuff. And so they did. Let's start with Germany. Hitler hated the Treaty of Versailles, and now he was ready to begin undoing it. In complete violation of the treaty, the first Luftwaffe squadrons were set up, conscription was introduced, and he pimped up his army. The Allies did nothing. Then Hitler sent his army back into the demilitarized Rhineland, giving orders to immediately retreat if the Allies showed up. The Allies did nothing. With his military re-strengthened, he could now move on to step 2. He wanted to rapidly increase the Aryan population, and to do so, he needed Lebensraum, or in other words, he would have to take over the world. But for now, a good portion of Europe would do, and he began eyeing up his neighbors. The Allies finally started to get worried, so they implemented a fairly useless diplomatic strategy called appeasement, and it went a little something like this. Hitler would say, I want that thing, and the Allies would say, you can't have that thing. Okay, you can have that thing, but no more.
It's like,
I want that thing. And
the
repeat.
other countries
In
were just so
1938, Hitler's
dumb,
army
like,
marched
it's
into Austria and just took it, with no resistance. Boom, this is Germany now. Next, he demanded to be given the Sudetenland, an area of Czechoslovakia with many ethnic Germans. The Allies held a meeting with Hitler in Munich and said, look, we're going to give you what... Hang on, this meeting is about my territory. Shouldn't I come to the meeting too? Anyway, we're going to give you what you want. Really? Yeah. Just like that? Yep. What's the catch? Just sign this piece of paper promising you won't invade the rest of Czechoslovakia.
That's it?
Okay. Then Chamberlain returned home victorious, waving his signed piece of paper in the air, declaring crisis to be averted and the continuation of world peace. And we built a statue of Chamberlain in his honor, and every day on the 30th of September we celebrate Chamberlain Day. Hitler's invading the rest of Czechoslovakia. What? He's invading the rest of Czechoslovakia. Oh. You lied to me. What do you expect? I'm Hitler. Not to be outdone, Mussolini also wanted to get in on the action. He thought to himself, isn't there a not yet colonized nation somewhere which is so underdeveloped that the people would be defending themselves against our tanks with literal bows and arrows and wooden spears? Oh, there is? Fantastic. And so he took it. Italy also wanted to control the entrance to the Adriatic Sea, so they occupied Albania. Then, in another incident which was maybe staged by the Japanese, gunfire was exchanged by Japanese and Chinese troops at the Marco Polo Bridge, and the Japanese launched yet another invasion against China. They swept through Beijing and Shanghai, and then advanced through the Yangtze Valley to China's then capital, Nanking. It was here that saw the worst of Japan's shocking atrocities committed against the Chinese people.
The Japanese are just
Back
so
in Europe,
ruthless.
Germany and Italy made
Some
their
of the stuff
relationship
they did
status
is just,
official by signing the Pact of Steel.
like,
Then,
worse
Hitler
than
turned
the
his eyes towards
extermination of
Poland,
the Jews.
and the hated Polish
Way
corridor,
worse.
splitting Germany in two. At this point, the Allies really had to put their foot down, and they warned him that an invasion of Poland would mean war. Hitler had planned to continue his advance eastward, but he didn't want to end up fighting a war on two fronts. So for now, he made an alliance with Stalin, saying,
Like I
how
said,
about
he
we
made
both
an
invade
alliance
Poland
with
and split it between
Stalin.
the two of us, and I definitely won't not refrain from not betraying you sometime in the future.
He just got too cocky and
Sounds-
attacked Stalin, you know, like...
Good. This new alliance
He
stunned
could
the
have
West.
won.
On the 1st of September 1939, German troops entered Poland, and Britain and France declared war on Germany. The Poles fought hard, but they were no match for the two
Polish
giants crashing
fought
down on them from
hard, I
either
give
side.
them that.
Then came a period known as the Phony War, where everyone just sort of sat around not doing much. The French had launched a small invasion into the Saarland, but they maintained mostly defensive positions, and after a while decided to just turn around and call it a day. Speaking of France, the French were still super proud of their victory in World War I, and they hadn't really moved on from it. They still used horses, they dispatched messages by motorbike instead of using radio, orders from the commander-in-chief were usually pretty vague, and the troops were rarely inspected. They built a line of defenses along their German border, but didn't bother extending it all the way to the Channel, and they wouldn't launch artillery strikes against Germany out of fear of being retaliated against. In a war, they didn't want to attack the enemy. And at first the UK wasn't much better. Chamberlain still naively hoped that the war could be ended diplomatically. Instead of bombing raids, the RAF dropped propaganda leaflets over German cities, which one air marshal said likely did nothing but provide the continent with toilet paper for the duration of the war. They also only sent 200,000 men to France, while the French had mobilized millions. Both Britain and France wanted to avoid a repeat of the First World War, and so they wanted to keep the war as far from home as possible. So they turned their eyes north, towards Norway. Neutral Sweden was exporting iron ore to Germany through neutral Norway, so the Allies asked them if they could please stop exporting iron ore to Germany, but this request was refused. Then, the Soviet Union attacked Finland, so the Allies said, how about we land troops in Norway and move them across Sweden to go help out your good pal Finland, and along the way maybe take control of all your armfields. But Norway and Sweden still said no, So the UK mined the waters around Norway to force any transport ships into international waters, and they also attacked a German tanker they found in the area. Hitler realized what the Allies were up to, and he quickly moved to secure his supply of iron ore. He launched an invasion through Denmark into Norway. The Allies rushed to land troops at key ports along the coast, but Germany had taken control of Norway's airfield, and their air superiority decided the fight. The Allies had to retreat. After this slightly embarrassing failure, Chamberlain resigned and was replaced with Winston Churchill, who had a slightly different approach to dealing with the Germans. Hitler's overall strategy was similar to Germany's First World War strategy. Attack France, defeat France, knocking out the UK in the process, then turn on the Soviet Union and win the war. During the phony war, the Allies had given Hitler time to prepare his forces. Now, he was ready to attack. The Allies had wanted to place troops in Belgium, but Belgium had refused, and in a move that surprised pretty much no one, Hitler launched an invasion to get around France's defenses. The Allies charged into Belgium at full speed to meet the German invasion head-on, and it looked like a repeat of the First World War was coming. But this time, Hitler had a trick up his sleeve. Blitzkrieg. As the Germans advanced, they sent thousands of refugees westward, slowing down the Allies. Then, to the south, the French had left the Ardennes, an area full of hills and forests, pretty underdefended because they thought it was naturally impenetrable. Well, the Germans were about to penetrate it with everything they had. They smashed 50 Wehrmacht divisions through and encircled the Allied armies at lightning speed. The best of the Allied forces were now trapped. The Germans squeezed in from all sides, taking out France's best armies and nearly wiping out the British too. But they managed to make a desperate last-minute escape at Dunkirk, with British civilian ships even making the perilous journey to bring their young men home. With most of the French forces depleted, the Germans breezed through, taking Paris, and France fell. What the Germans couldn't do in World War I, Hitler had done just like that. Hitler hoped that with the fall of France, the UK would also lose hope and sue for peace. But quite annoyingly, it didn't, and he needed to secure the Western Front, so he tried to force them into submission with mind games. The UK were now all alone, and Hitler wanted to emphasize that. First of all, just before France fell, Italy finally declared war on the Allies, making the UK's situation even worse. Next, instead of just occupying all of France, Hitler occupied the coastal areas for defense, but allowed France to continue its existence as a German puppet state. This way, it looked like the UK's old ally had decided to switch sides. Hitler also hoped that the UK wouldn't attack any of her old allies' navy bases or colonies in Africa, giving Hitler an extra line of defense to the south. But the UK made sure to respond to this by sailing down to France's navy base in Algeria and wrecking a bunch of ships. So have at it. Hitler then began laying down plans for an invasion of Great Britain. Before German troops could land on British soil, he would first need air and naval superiority across the Channel. Waves of German bombers came, while the completely outnumbered RAF worked bravely around the clock in an attempt to quell the German attacks. At first, the Luftwaffe targeted British ports and coastal facilities. Then it attacked RAF bases, crippling the RAF's ability to defend the nation. And it looked like Hitler's Great British invasion was coming. But then, Churchill ordered a small, pretty insignificant bombing raid over Berlin. It didn't do much damage, but Hitler was furious, and he immediately ordered the Luftwaffe to refocus its attacks on civilian targets in London. Children were sent off to the countryside away from their parents to avoid danger, and frequent trips to air raid shelters became a daily occurrence. But British morale held firm. Smiling, knitting, lounging casually, these people have balls of steel. This refocusing on London also gave the RAF breathing space to reorganize, so Hitler kind of shot himself in the foot there. Just the foot for now. Finally, the Luftwaffe sent one massive all-out attack on London, and the RAF successfully repelled it, destroying many of the German aircraft and placing air superiority firmly in British hands. Hitler's invasion had to be postponed, but the bombing of British cities continued for some time.
Yeah. So that's part one, guys. Alright guys, amazing content here, great informational skit, very entertaining, pretty happy with the video. A lot of what I said kind of in lines with what is going on throughout this whole documentary or informational piece. Pretty much I just kind of gave you a rundown or a summary of what I remembered and what I thought, and it's kind of aligning with what he's saying. The only thing is that this video is a lot more detail oriented, so it kind of gives you a lot more information, a lot more in-depth deep dive into what happened during World War II. So let's continue on in part 2, and I'll see you guys there. Let's go.